I'm Christina Rhea, and welcome to Breaking Out of Breaking In, a practical filmmaking podcast about taking your creative career into your own hands and making great work get seen without playing the Hollywood game.
Or at least while changing the rules. Hey, I'm Bri Castellini, your other co-host, and today we are breaking down 2022. Yes, that's right. This is our last regular episode of Season 2. Before we dive in, don't forget that we release bonus content for each episode over on patreon.com/breakingoutpod. So if you want to support us and continue to get yourself even more info and resources, y'all, 2022 was chock full of really great resources. Truly, every time we would try to brainstorm for what should we do for bonus content, and I was panicking because it's a month away, I don't know what I'm gonna post, and then we'd come up with something and it's the best infographic we've ever made. It's $3 gets you access to templates, I lovingly curated resources, we got color coded stuff, I learned how to conditional format and make it easy to digest. Guys, there's so much. We also reorganized it for you mid-year, so if you've been dragging your feet and thinking, I bet there's an easier way to prepare for a project, there is. It's by paying us $3 and going through our archive of really wonderful resources. So that's the first recap that we're doing in this episode is, hey, our Patreon, full to bursting with truly anything you might need. And if there's something missing, let us know and we'll add it.
Yeah.
So it's the end of 2022. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. I feel like I should just say at the top that my cat Addie passed away 2 months ago, and I'm still grieving. I really miss her, and that has just kind of made the second half of 2022 kind of shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's been some good stuff, and we'll talk about it, but I'm in a little bit of that still.
It's definitely been a strange year. There were sprints of really wonderful stuff, sprints of I think the world might actually be ending stuff, to context set in the timeline because God knows what's going to happen before we actually release this episode. Yeah. We're recording this episode on 11/11, make a wish. I think this episode comes out the first week of December. So we're still in week 1 of Elon's Twitter. Yeah. That's how I assume I will be marking time from now on. So not quite the end of the year, but close enough. But yeah, it's been a very strange year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I figured a good place to start would be to look at our goals that we set out for last year that I don't think we set for this year because I forgot that was a thing that we should probably do. So Christina,
yeah, but what is time?
What is time? Maybe that'll be the Patreon bonus, is that since we're not doing it live on air, if you want to see our stuff for next year, subscribe to our Patreon, because I make New Year's resolutions every year, so I'm sure I'm definitely going to do them. So yeah, that I'm making that statement right now. The Patreon bonus content for this episode is going to be our 2023 creative and life goals. So if you want to set accountability with us and be nosy, subscribe to our Patreon for only $3 a month. It's a great deal. So Christina, your 2022 goals were buy a house, make progress on your horror feature Silent Night, if not in production by the fall, on the road towards production, write all 8 episodes of your horror anthology Little Whispers, perhaps as the showrunner of a writer's room, get back into rock climbing and pottery, continue commitment to prioritizing her humanity over your career, and redefining success in healthier ways. So
I feel like I did pretty well.
I think so. I think a lot of it you got done in the first couple of months.
Yeah, so I did buy a house. If you want to hear about that, listen to our mid-year check-in, because that was the big news of that. I'm not in production for Silent Night, but I am in development, and it's been sort of a year of notes and thinking I'm going to get to the next stage and then more notes. And I'm still kind of in that. I have a meeting next week that will hopefully be my final notes meeting. If my goal is to not have any more in that meeting, but if there are more, it will hopefully be the last of them.
I mean, it seems from what I know of the notes that you're receiving, they've been getting fewer and further between. It's tiny little shifts of one conversation, shifts of another conversation. So it's not these big sweeping you need to make major changes. It's this script is basically done, and now the people that are helping you develop and potentially produce it want to tweak it to make it perfect.
That's right, but it has been so the meetings are so far apart that I make the edits and then I'm waiting forever. And then it is just like a slight tweak on the slight tweak I already did. And so, so yeah, it's been a lot of like hurrying up to wait.
Hopefully we can be more transparent about that at some point next year.
Yes,
because it's been super interesting to watch this all happen from afar.
Yeah, and it's been super interesting to experience, and it's been a learning experience. And yeah, it's like, it's a situation where I am hoping it will get me where I want to be, which is to be at a place where I can just be directing and have actual money and not be wearing all the hats, and like have the ability on the distribution side to get it recognized bigger because of who's involved. But it also is, so I'm grateful for that and I'm excited about that, but it also is a reminder of why I've always been such a just like get it done, do it myself, wear all the hats type of person, because like I'm so bad at inaction, and like I just want to be doing, and I know that I can do all the things on my own. It's just it won't be at the caliber that I want it to be. It won't be, again, like all the things that I've talked about in our burnout episode and everything. It's just like I'm tired of that hustle, but this is like a whole different kind of hustle that's requiring different skills and like making me silence parts of myself that I think make me the like go-getter that I am in a different way. So
the Hollywood game is just starting to change you, and might not be a good thing.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I will say that it's like given me a reminder why I've always been on the side of working outside of the Hollywood game.
Sure.
But I also feel like I have to try and play this game because I've got no other cards to play. Like I'm burnt out on the DIY side. So yeah. And my goal is, so it's like trying to navigate this by making sure that I'm sticking true to the story I want to tell and my vision as an artist and my goals as like a human with integrity, while also understanding that like everything we talk about, there are compromises you have to make in order to work with someone else's money and like work within an industry that is built the way it's built on whatever, ideals it's built on, good and bad. Again, like I would love to be more transparent, but I'm not at a stage where I fully can be just yet.
But hopefully 2023, maybe when you read our Patreon goals for next year, hopefully you will feel some excitement too.
Yes.
Did you write more of Little Whispers? I know you had like an outline and some like log lines.
Yeah, so I had an outline and some log lines, but I said in our last year's episode that I was interested in sort of the writer's roominess of that, because the episodes were things I was interested in directing, but I felt like someone else should write them, some of them, because I wrote them like with different cultures as like the backdrop of them. And so that just didn't happen. It's just still something that would be fun. But development of Silent Night kind of just like consumed most of my writing energy. But I did write a new short inspired by a found footage episode, which was cool, and also just inspired by my move and being scared of ticks. And
it was very cool. I hope she makes it because it was very fun.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I submitted it for like a little grant thing. I felt like if someone decides they want to give me a little money to make it, then I'll make it. And if they don't, that doesn't mean I won't make it, but maybe I won't like run out and do it right now. And then I also wrote a new feature with Kelsey Rauber, friend of the pod.
Yeah, friend of the pod. It's in my queue. I'm gonna hopefully read it this weekend. But yeah, there's been a lot of co-writing this year, I feel like.
Yeah, so we can talk more about that. I won't include it in this little.
Yeah. Spoiler alert for later in the episode. Something's happening, maybe. And then rock climbing and pottery.
Yeah, so pottery I did try. I realized really not my thing. Maybe I would have, and I think maybe I would enjoy it if it were just like sculpting with your hands, but the wheel was just not for me. Like the coordination of this, of the speed and the pressure and hunching over hurt my back. Like it just all wasn't quite the relaxing thing I thought it would be. It was more like stressful than anything. And then rock climbing didn't happen because my husband got a hernia like right after we moved in. And so then that was something we wanted to do together. So it'll be a next year thing. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll put a pin in that, I guess.
And the mindset stuff, I definitely feel like I've done very well with.
Awesome. Do you feel, obviously, like, grief notwithstanding, but like last year at the end of the year, we had a couple of like bummer episodes about like burnout and stuff. Like, do you feel like that has improved, has lessened? Like,
it has. I think the change of scenery, I think being out in nature has really helped. I think just having like feeling like I can take a deep breath here in a way that I couldn't necessarily in the city. I think like it's been so much change, and now I feel like I was making a lot of progress, and then Addie died and I felt like my whole world came crumbling down.
Sure.
And so now I'm just like trying to stay above water a little bit emotionally. So it's hard to say where I'm at, but I like judge based on where I was, at the very beginning of September before she passed, I was doing very well. And I think that was a lot of starting to define my life beyond being a filmmaker in like various ways. And I feel, again, it's just like, it's so hard because there's so many, like we did all this renovating of our house, and literally the week that it finished, Addie died. So like I didn't even get to live in this period of like, oh, I'm settled and I'm happy here, because it kind of like got ripped away. But yeah, I am, I don't know. I feel like I feel a lot better outside of that than I did at the end of last year.
Well,
which is so hard to like reconcile, but
right.
Because I feel because I just like actually just feel awful, and like I don't know, for a good almost month I kind of felt like, how am I supposed to just like wake up every day and just live? I don't know how to do that. Yeah, and it, for people who like don't have pets, they don't get it, but my cats are like my life. My children. I lost a child. That's how I feel.
Well, and Addie was so much a part of the podcast too. Like, even though I've never met them, got to say hi every time we recorded, and then hi again 2 minutes later when she walked across the keyboard again.
Right. That's been, I think, the hardest. I'm so grateful in a weird way for the pandemic, because it meant I spent so much more time with her than I would have when I was traveling every week, like before. But that also meant that like literally everything I do and did, she was a part of. And so there's like nothing I can do that doesn't remind me of her, including podcasting, because like it was always such an annoyance, but also so much fun to just like have her be so annoying while I was trying to podcast, and have her like sprawl out across. And she was always so sweet and cuddly. And so like the first time we podcasted when she wasn't there, I was like, I had a really hard time. And and I don't know. And I feel like I'm missing this sort of troublemaker energy in my life, because my other cat, Vic, is just so good. He's like the best, most well-behaved, sweetest cat. And he like doesn't bring me any annoyances. And I'm just so used to having a little like snooty
shit stirrer.
Yeah, exactly. And she brought that to my life, where it was like, oh, what's Addie up to now? And I don't have that, and I really miss it. I miss her, but that's life.
Yeah. Well, we will always keep Addie in our hearts. She will always be a part of this podcast, and I'm hoping she's causing trouble in kitty heaven.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope she's peeing on God's couch and his rug right now.
Yeah. So what about you?
All right. So my goals for 2022 were to grow my LA community and get better about stating my career goals, quit 2 of my jobs, write 2 new original pilots, take at least 3 full days off a month. Eagle-eyed listeners will remember that in 2021 it was take 2 days off a month. So I'm really making some strides and taking time off. Or did I? We'll see in a second. Also, embrace the results of the worldview. Everything happens for a reason, i.e., regardless of the reason something has happened, it happened happen. So instead of dwelling on what if, focus on what's next. So we both kind of had like sort of big picture mindset changes. So to start us off, growing my LA community and get better at stating my career goals. I've given myself partial credit for this because I did grow my LA community to the extent that like I went on a lot of like coffee dates earlier in the year. I went on a lot more. The end of my year was sort of like consumed in like weddings, my own wedding, and like travel, and now I'm sick again. So not COVID. Still haven't gotten COVID, knock on wood, but I did get sick a couple of weeks ago that kind of derailed like my post-wedding productivity spurt that I was supposed to have. Stupid wedding. We'll talk about that in a second. But anyways, so yeah, I went on a lot of coffee dates. There were a lot of people that I knew from the indie film world, from the podcast world, and just generally from like my time in web series that I knew via Twitter or, you know, conversations like this, but I'd never actually gotten to meet in person. So I did finally get to meet some of those people, which was really nice. A couple other people that I knew from New York moved to LA, and so I got to see them a little bit. I went to 2 networking events that were like official networking events. I really invested in my 2 writers groups. I'm now only in one because I just ran out of time to do both, especially because I haven't been writing as much screen writing as previously. But yeah, so like I don't know if I can say that my LA community has expanded to the degree that I was hoping for, to the extent that like I have someone to network with once a week. It doesn't take a ton of energy to like go out for coffee and have career conversations. I don't have a bunch of people that I can be like, hey, let's make a short film together, which I think was like what I had in mind when I was thinking about growing my community. Like I was basically sort of looking for a way to substitute what I had in New York when I first moved there, you know, having a group of people that were like, hey, if someone has a script, let's figure out how to make it. I feel like we've all kind of aged out of that. And so I think my hope was not fulfilled, less because I didn't do enough to meet people and more because most of my peers are at the stage that you and I are at, Christina, where we're like, we'll write something, and like if someone wants to give me money, maybe, but like it doesn't feel like it's going to give us the same juice as it used to. You know, it's hard to justify in your 30s doing stuff for free, knowing the portfolio you've already put together of stuff you made for free and how that didn't move the needle as much as we hoped. So that's that on that. We might talk more about like community building in season 3, because like it is definitely interesting since we both moved to new areas, having to sort of rediscover other people in real life now that we are theoretically able to do that. So putting a pin in that conversation. I did quit 2 of my jobs. Technically, I quit 3 of them because at the end of 2021, my burnout episode was a lot. We recorded that in like, I feel like October of last year, and October of last year was truly nightmarish for me. I was teaching at 2 different graduate programs, and one of those programs, like just the semester was just really hellish. It was a weird group of students, and it was not conducive to remote teaching at all. So that was just like rough on its own. But then I also had another class that I was teaching. I was helping out with Starable Fest. I was hosting some stuff. I was doing a lot of jury stuff, like I was helping judge submissions, and I was helping them program a little bit, and I was working at Seed and Spark still full time. And the combination of like all of those things happening at once was awful. I was also traveling a bunch. I had to travel for one of my teaching jobs, then I was traveling for Seed and Spark, and yeah, it was just too much going on. I had like very recently moved. Like it was too much. And I was finally in a financial position, thank goodness, where I didn't need to do that anymore. Like the year before and the year before that, and arguably the year before that, like the previous 3 years, I did need all those jobs because I was not getting paid at any of them enough to like sustain myself. But I had finally gotten to a point where I could, so I let it go. And that was scary. Like it was scary quitting a bunch of my jobs because like I had accrued them for a reason. And you know, I am by no means a rich woman or even a comfortable woman in many ways, but like a lot of my hoarding was fear-based and no longer need-based. So I decided to see what it would be like to let that go. And it was great. Oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not teaching. And it did actually open me up to do a bunch of other cool stuff this year. So like A+, quit your jobs. I did technically write two new original pilots. I wrote one that I like a lot and one that I hate. I wrote a original pilot, like a kind of noir satire set in a post-apocalyptic future, where like the world has been effectively destroyed because of climate change, and there is a girl who lives in one of the like last survivor settlements and has kind of like grown up via like old world like noir storytelling, and so she kind of adopts this persona and solves mysteries in a post-apocalyptic world, and she's, you know, she's trying to be like Humphrey Bogart, and everyone's like, what are you doing? I think it's very funny. She has a cat companion who is also a little bit of a shit stirrer, so like clearly I had inspirations. And then I wrote another one that was like based on a concept for a feature that I had a while back that was sort of like rom-com-y in nature. And it just, I haven't found the engine for it yet. And I honestly think it should be a feature. I just don't have a lot of experience writing features, but I did write it. It is a half-hour pilot and it is bad and no one else will read it. So that's that. But the reason that I only wrote these two pilots this year is because I got a little bit distracted, as many of you know. So I've now written 2.5 manuscripts of novels this year. I wrote a novel in April, over the course of April and May, a novel over the course of July and August, and we are now in the middle of NaNoWriMo, like the official NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month for you non-prose people. And I am 23,000 words into a new novel. So I don't know what's happening with that. I guess we'll see next year. Because like I do plan on eventually like querying and seeing if anyone's interested in these books. And they are books about women in the film and TV industry. So I haven't completely given up on the last decade of my life and this adventure. But it has honestly been kind of a nice change of pace because it's for me. Like there's no pressure. Like nobody in my life expects me to be writing books. So I'm like, cool, I'll do this now. And it doesn't require money. Like I just need a quiet place to write. You know, and like if something doesn't happen with it, that's too bad. But like I could self-publish if I really wanted to. And like, I don't know, it feels like it feels nice to stretch a different creative muscle, but still be writing, still ultimately be telling stories, but, you know, with a little bit less collaborative pressure that, you know, TV and film kind of put on you sometimes.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with that.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I hope that people like them. I'm having a really good time writing them. I was slacking Christina the other day because the new book is set on like a studio lot, and the villain of the romance novel is like a investor who's trying to like gamify like filmmaking and like, you know, basically using like AI to generate log lines and then like paying a non-union writer like very little money to like make it, because they're expecting like, well, if we mash together two popular tropes, then that's all that movie making is, right? So it's like this really cynical like nepotism baby, like how can I make money at this and not give a shit about art kind of like perspective. And the book is about like people fighting against that and proving that that is not actually a useful or viable model. So Christina and I were sending like articles back and forth about like the downfall of the media industry and how I can use that for my my various rants in the book. That was fun. Fun stuff.
It's great because you can get the books published and then you will get to do the movie adaptations yourself.
That's what people like. I had a coffee with Amy DePaula, who was, I think, our first guest this year. Our first episode, and I happened to be writing the first book at that time, and she's like, oh, that's great, IP is super useful, which is actually something we talked about in her episode about like podcast IP and stuff like that. And like continuously people throughout the year have been like, oh great, IP is awesome. And I'm like, I think you guys are forgetting that like having IP requires a step that none of us are discussing. which is to get the book published. So like maybe everybody relax a little bit. I appreciate that everyone seems not like aghast that I've done this with my year, but still let's maybe temper some expectations, okay? Okay. I tried to write novels a full decade ago and it doesn't work. I do think though that like it's funny how taking a decade-long break from writing prose has made my prose writing so much better because like I finally appreciate the aspects of prose that I was running away from when I went into screenwriting. And so that has been kind of a fun rediscovery.
Yeah.
So
what I think also is nice from the, maybe you feel this way, but I feel this way as someone who doesn't ever write prose, that it would have a feeling of like completion in a way that screenwriting does not, where it's like not a real thing you've made and accomplished
right
until it is produced and watchable, you know, like that's just that's one stage of a long process, as opposed to you finished a novel, you know, like that in and of itself is amazing. And like you can kind of feel like you did it in a way that I don't feel is the case with screenwriting.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Like the only comparable experience I've had for like what it feels like emotionally to finish a novel draft is when I finished Brains season 6, my web series that I produced 2 seasons of and then continued to write until I got to the end, because that was just such a like, that was like a 3.5-4 year process of like writing that show. And even though I knew I was never going to produce it by the end, like those characters were such a part of my development as an artist and as a filmmaker and all these things. And so like that felt close. But like that was also, I wrote 6 feature film length scripts by the end, you know, like those were long form things. But yeah, like definitely finishing a new pilot, like the pilots that I mentioned this year, like when I got to the end of a script, it was like, all right, good, it's done. I can send it to somebody. Like it doesn't come with that experience. You're totally right. Because so much of it you have to like leave out. Like there's, you know, you get to a part in a script where you're like, I'm sure the director will figure this out, or like this I should leave to the actor. If I give them too much, like I'll be, you know, puppeteering them rather than letting them be the professionals that they are. And like that's nice sometimes. I do love the collaborative aspects of filmmaking, and I think that it's really special when you embrace it rather than fight against it. But it is definitely nice to sometimes have something that's just me. That it is something that like is done, is a complete piece of work that like can get better, but does not require a full other artist to come in and do their thing, and then another full artist to come in and then $15,000, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice. Who knows? Maybe we'll hear something about that next year. I have to relearn the publishing industry though, and that sounds terrifying. I'm pretty sure I've taken at least 3 days off a month. I did a lot more tracking of this back in 2021 when I was just trying to take 2 days off because I still had like 8 jobs and 2 podcasts. This year, Burn Noticed, my other podcast, we finished recording in April and then we finished releasing in July. So like I have been second podcast free for most of the year, and that honestly made a bigger difference in some ways than my jobs. So I loved Burn Notice. It's still getting a lot of like downloads, which is wild to me. Like people are still discovering that show, and I'm really proud of what we did on it for 3 years. But I'm also really glad it's done, because that was a weekly podcast with over 100 total episodes. I was solely editing it. I was solely promoting it and tweeting about it. Too much work for absolutely no money. Although we did have a couple of very sweet listeners buy some merch and just like Venmo us. Like I would make jokes on that podcast where I'm like, I'll tell you the name of this guy I made out with in college, but you have to Venmo me $100. And somebody did, and it was very funny. So like, thank you to our listeners there. But yeah, so I'm pretty sure I've taken 3 full days off a month because I've also been reading a lot more, and that does require you to not be working. Like you know, if watching TV, I can be doing other stuff. I can't, you know, I can't split focus if I'm reading. And I have read, as of last night, 297 books this year. Actually, technically 297 romance books. I read 3 non-romance books. So technically I've read 300 brand new books this year. I've also reread 36 of them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a weird year.
I've read like 2 full books this year and have started probably like 7.
Which books did you read this year?
Oh my God, I don't even know. I mean,
you mean you don't have a color-coded spreadsheet where you keep track of like if there's an autistic lead, if there is a queer lead?
I know the only one like off the top of my head I'm positive I finished this year is Passing because I watched the film and then wanted to read the book. But yeah, I've bought so many books at my new bookstore and have just like been like, oh, I should read this. And then instead I just go fucking put on HGTV or something, you know, like.
It's definitely a muscle you have to get into. Like, I don't think I would have done this if 2021 I hadn't had the resolution to start every day with reading, because that was like I basically had to like train myself to do it, because it is hard. Even now I've read 300 books this year, and still sometimes like sitting down with the intention to just do nothing but read is hard. So like there will be a couple of days at a time where I'm like I want to read but I just don't, because you know the world is distracting. But like you kind of do have to train yourself to get back into it. So if anybody wants to read,
maybe that'll be my resolution for next year. Because in like middle school and high school and even through college, I would be reading a new book almost every day. And now I like just buy books and they sit there. And because I'm like, oh, I have, 17 tabs open with articles I need to read. And I have podcast episodes I need to listen to. And also like, I need to just binge mindless stuff because I'm just grieving and depressed and feel like shit. And the world is on fire. But I feel like reading might be like a better escape. So I should probably try and make it a thing.
I honestly cannot recommend enough starting your day with reading, because like I used to start my day just like checking email, checking Slacks, checking Twitter, which is not probably a good way to wake up a brain. But like, and I think what that helped me do is not have so many expectations of myself, because it's not like finish a book a week. Like I think those sorts of resolutions, when you're going from 0 to 100 like that, are not conducive. But if it's just like read even a paragraph or 2 a day, like some mornings you're just not going to want to do it. But if you train yourself to just like take a little bit of story in every day, then I found that to be a really valuable experience.
Yeah.
So that's my little books soapbox.
I did have a time over the summer where sitting outside and reading was really nice. I need to replicate that with like cozy winter reading somehow, I guess.
Well, I'm excited to see aesthetic Instagrams of you reading in various parts of your house.
Selfies. That'll be the reminding thing. Selfies.
No, you need to get your husband to take them of you, because like everyone knows that those Instagram girlies do not take their own photos. It is important that you have a photographer.
That's right. This is just a little tangent. I bought this. There's this vegan chocolate shop that's like a 35-minute drive away. And we went and checked it out. And I bought these hot cocoa like chocolate bombs. They're just like balls of chocolate that you pour hot milk over and they dissolve. And I tried to record a video by just holding my phone over, and then the camera just steamed up. And I was like, this is why I'll never be an influencer. Like I can't even.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But was the hot chocolate good?
It was very good. It was pumpkin spice. So it was like perfect week of Halloween. Spent way too much money on chocolate. But it was
you know what? Life is about the little joys. Allow yourself to enjoy these things. Also, if anyone wants to start reading romance novels, I have a romance newsletter now. I don't think I had it the last time we did an update episode.
You did not.
Because it was sort of an on a whim thing. Because I started recommending books to my coworkers at Seed and Spark, just because like, every week I do roughly the same thing there. And so when I have to do my like weekly update for work stuff, it's like did more crowdfunding PPAC, talk to more people. It's like there's not a lot changes in terms of my week to week. So I was like, I started just doing little like paragraph long book reviews. And then I was like, I have all of these book reviews now and I've read 300 books. Maybe I should be doing more with this, especially now that I'm trying to like do prose again. It's probably good if I actually, do something with that. Like I need to start brand building.
Right. I've appreciated your recommendations, even though I have yet to actually read them. I bought a couple of them, so I've pressured myself into having to eventually read everything because I've spent the money to buy them all.
Well, I look forward to next year's update and you telling me what you think of a couple of them. But yeah, I've that's been fun. It's been fun kind of like thinking critically about the kinds of books that I'm reading so that I can think more critically about the books that I'm writing.
That's great.
Moving right along. Yeah, I have been taking full days off a month because I had to in order to read 300 books this year. But it has been a really nice like resetting of priorities. Like some days I just don't do work and like I'm getting better at not feeling guilty about that. And that has been a huge mental health relief. Like I had a conversation last night with a friend of mine where I was once again being peer pressured into doing mushrooms. People like literally I will have conversations with people and at some point inevitably they will be like, Bri, you should try mushrooms. I'm like, what is happening? What is like truly like one of my old bosses like on my last day of work was like, let's go get a drink. I think you should do mushrooms. He wasn't offering me mushrooms. He was just like, you should do mushrooms as like an addition to, I hope you have a good rest of your career.
Were they like are they like saying you specifically, like you are a type of person who needs mushrooms, or just like in general, they think everyone should try mushrooms?
I mean, it's both, certainly, but like, no, it's me specifically. Like we will have a conversation and then they'll like tell me about the last time they tripped mushrooms and like how great it was. And they think that I will really bet like I cannot explain to you how like truly I cannot count how many times somebody has tried to get me to do mushrooms. It's a very strange thing. But yeah, I was having this conversation with somebody last night and she was telling me about like what she gets out of mushrooms. And I was like, that sounds awesome for you. Like, good for you. That does not sound appealing to me at all. And like so much of it is like, you know, it lets you relax. It lets you appreciate new elements. I'm like, I feel like I'm appreciating a lot of things. Like I'm certainly not like in a place in my like career that I'm particularly thrilled with. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff about like my future that is kind of up in the air because of career stuff. But like the actual building blocks of my day-to-day life are pretty great. I have an apartment that I love. I just got married to the love of my life. I like have a car that I can drive and one day away will be my mom or will be the Redwoods, my favorite place in the world, or will be like a number of places. I'm writing and feeling very creatively fulfilled by the work that I'm producing. I have wonderful friends. And so it's like, I am finally in a place in my life, I think because I took some time off and like gave myself a break, that I feel pretty good day to day. You know, yeah, there's frustrations. Yeah, there's, you know, an amorphous future, whatever it's going to be. But like my day to day has actually become really lovely. And I like talking to somebody about why I don't want to do mushrooms was kind of putting that in perspective. And I really do think it's because of the stuff that you and I kind of intentionally set up for ourselves this year. So I'm grateful. Awesome. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that you and I have conversations like this, that people listen to these conversations and seem to care about them. Because like I can tell you my mental health improvements from like this time last year, night and day.
That's great. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. So I also think embracing the worldview of everything happens for a reason, focusing on what's next instead of what if has been a big part of that too. Where like, because if I was really still in my old mindset, I probably wouldn't have written a book. I probably wouldn't have read this many books because it feels so off course. But it's like, who says what course I need to be taking? You know, like who says what, you know, yellowed wood path I should be taking? Rubber Frost, go sit down. I have something else to do today. So like, it's been very freeing, I think, to like give myself a break and just follow my impulses, my creative impulses, where they're going. And then the other thing I did this year is because I got to quit all of my jobs, it opened me up to spend some time on a freelance job earlier in the year where I taught a class for the CBS Pipeline Challenge, which is, did we talk about that on the podcast?
I feel like we did
Sure.
in the mid-year, I think.
We might have, yeah. But in any case, that was a really cool time. A lot of those students have kept in touch. One of those students, I think, is a regular listener of ours. Shout out to Dorothy if you're out there. And I look forward to doing it again next year because I have the time and freedom to do so. Because like I do really love teaching. I just didn't love the like traditional education system teaching, like teaching grad school, being an adjunct, garbage. But like these little freelance gigs where like I teach a 5-week class here, I teach a couple of film school classes through Seed and Spark, like that I have been really enjoying because I love talking to students, but you know, not in the traditional way. So I hope that next year for both of us, we get to design a path for ourselves where we get to do more of that. And it sounds like we both have options for that.
Yeah, and we'll probably talk about that more in the community like building update of next year.
Well, that's kind of what we're going to get to. If there's nothing else that we want to talk about our lives.
We can. Sure, yeah.
So we are taking a little bit longer of a hiatus this time around between seasons 2 and 3.
I have a funny story though.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Well, then let's do a funny story first.
Well, maybe it's not funny. I find it funny, but Ezra can decide to cut it if he
It's our podcast. It's funny if we say it's funny.
I feel like you'll appreciate it. But the only reason why I say it maybe it's not funny is because I have to set up this context. It's only funny in context.
Sure.
But what I think is interesting about it is like it's me learning small town ways, because that's been a lot of my year is like figuring out how to live in a small town and like live, you know, in nature. And I'm not a city kid anymore, you know. And also like small town politics are just there's really good sort of like mini versions of the country at large. And so it's so interesting to see how things play out here on like really small levels. And so anyway, the context is the library in my town has been debated over for years because the conservatives in town don't want to put any money into it. And so they've been having votes since like 2010 to at first restore the library because it's in this building that's it's an old house that's over 100 years old and is riddled with mold. And for years they would try and get money towards like basically knocking it down and rebuilding it, and that was always voted down. So that always failed. And then they tried to buy this building next door that's this like really beautiful old mansion essentially, but it can't handle the weight of the books, so it has to.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because it's like sinking essentially, and so if you add the weight of books, it would like really sink.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it was really interesting to learn that, and so they were like, we would have to spend X amount of money to reinforce it. That got voted down, and so then this year last year, they found this building just outside of town. That's actually right near me. It's a mile out of town, and it's beautiful and it's new and it would cost less than the other options would have. And also like the demographics of the town have changed enough. Younger people have moved here that like a vote passed to buy that instead of to try and rebuild or to move next door. They passed it to move to this new building. And so all of the conservatives then who didn't want that. And it's all about money. It's all about like not wanting that money to go towards a socialist thing, essentially, is like what it boils down to.
Books, famously socialist.
Yeah, yes. But there's this propaganda group that I learned about that has long been like the villain of this story that has been fighting any money going towards the library. But they're really clever in that they call themselves Friends of the Library. And everything that they everything that they do is like they take a real concern and they make that their talking point, but they're really like they don't actually care about that thing. And so with the current like the it was a huge majority won to move the library. But the main issue that is a genuine concern about this is that it's a mile out of town now. And so people who don't drive, people who are like elderly and generally, will walk everywhere or have someone driving them or just generally take like the local bus service in town. It's an accessibility issue that it's outside of town. And so that's like a real thing. And a proposal that was also voted on was to put a little bit more money into a trolley that would take people to and from the center of town to the library. And so
And what did friends at the library think about this?
Yes, friends of the library is like pretending that's not a proposal on the table and is actually actively fighting that so that they can use the accessibility issue as their like main talking point. And so anyway, I joined this Facebook group for locals, and I realized all of this through like bickering that was happening. And it's so interesting because there are people who are genuinely concerned about the accessibility issue that are convinced by friends of the library to be against the move in the library's decisions because they don't know about this trolley like thing that's on the table. And so it can be very hard then to differentiate between who are like real citizens who have been manipulated versus who are these like people spreading propaganda. And because then that same group started spreading a rumor that the building was built on this toxic waste site. And like fact checkers have proven that that's not the case, but that was a rumor that they were spreading.
What these people could do if they spent even half of this energy doing literally anything else.
Like,
this is insane.
But to me, it's like such a good look at this really small thing, but it's how it works in the country at large and how Republicans operate in the propaganda machine and how it's so hard because they're using a real issue to win over people who are just like not fully informed. And so they're just sort of like taking at face value what this group says because of how they've marketed themselves and how they're targeting people. So anyway, all this is set up for a few weekends ago. Justin and I decided to we've been trying to go to more community things because we're trying to like, figure out who are people here and like
be a part of the community.
Right, exactly. And so there was this Scarecrow Fest that was being held on this land. The Land Conservancy, they have this like big open field and it was really beautiful. And we were like, oh, there's going to be like tons of scarecrows. It's going to be so much fun. And so we think it's going to be like a day's activity. And we get there and it's really just like 7 little scarecrows. and they're not really scarecrows so much as just like mannequins dressed up in random clothes. Some of them are like meant to look like famous figures and others are just kind of random. And then there's like a little tic-tac-toe area for kids and there's one food vendor. We thought it was going to be a lot bigger deal than it actually ended up being. And so we're walking and we're like, okay, I guess this is it. Like, it's not really the day that we thought it was going to be. And so we kind of take it in for like 5 minutes and then decide, okay, let's go eat brunch or something. And so we're leaving. And as we're leaving, this little elderly woman is like, excuse me, can you help me with my scarecrow? And this was when we realized that like everyone in town had the option to make your own scarecrow. That was kind of like the vibe of it, but it wasn't advertised as that. So I didn't quite like understand. I thought it was like an official, there's going to be a bunch of scarecrows here as opposed to like make your own mannequin, which is really what it was. So we're like, sure. She's asking Justin, my husband. And so he's like, yeah, okay. And he walks over and I'm like, this woman looks familiar. I think she's in this Facebook group, but I can't place her. Like, is she one of the extremist people or is she one of the like manipulated people or one of the cool people who are like trying to fact check? And she's like, she has this kind of like Spitfire vibe to her, like, and so I was like, I could like this woman. I could really not like this woman. I don't know.
Sure.
And Justin's just like pulling this huge mannequin out and he pulls it out and it's like really close to his face. So he can't really see what it is. And I notice what it is and I'm like, oh my God. And so it's a mannequin in a hazmat suit. And it's like got this like weird alien face. And it says on it, Library Board of Trustees. And they've just got like money stuffed in its pockets. And it's got all this little index cards written on it that are like toxic waste and like hoarding money and like unnecessary spending.
That is This is so good. I'm so glad you're telling this story, Christina. This is staying in the podcast. Oh my God.
And it's like, and it's just, it's got all these different, like, all written on it, and just like fake Monopoly money, like falling out of every little slot on the hazmat suit. And, and like the pitched alien face. I'm like, what the fuck? And so he's carrying it, having no idea, and I'm standing there walking with him like, oh my God, like I hope people don't associate us with this. I hope that we don't see it, because we met a few of our neighbors already, so I'm like, I hope none of our neighbors are here. And then the woman comes over and she's like, hey, your mannequin looks great. Like, she's checking us in. She's obviously just being friendly. And I'm like, we're not with her. Like, he's helping her.
I need to be clear. We're being good neighbors. We do not. This is not us. Do not agree.
And then as Justin's like, he's just like, okay, where do you want me to put it? Because he's kind of getting annoyed. Because she stops to talk at some point with someone, and he's just standing there with it. So then she's like, oh, over here. I'm like, okay, put it down and let's get out of here. And I'm trying to, and then the event photographer comes over, and he starts snapping photos of Justin holding it, putting it down.
Oh God, this is like literally a sitcom episode.
I know.
This is so funny.
So I'm like both trying to pull him out of the photos, but also trying not to be seen myself in the photos.
Oh my God, Christina.
And then and the man is just, I'm trying to be like, he's not set up yet. Like, maybe wait. And he just keeps snapping photos as a little old man. And he's not even snapping photos of the woman in it. And it's her thing. And so finally he puts it down, and then we walk away, and I'm laughing and telling Justin, I'm like, thank God, like, neither one of us is running for office or something. Like, this would be such a controversy.
Funny.
And yeah, it was just it was really funny to me. And it's such a specific thing that like outsiders wouldn't really get, but it's funny because I was kind of like, if it were something else, like something overtly offensive, then I would have been like, you can't carry that. Like, sorry, ma'am, like find someone else.
That's very like Parks and Rec meets Gilmore Girls.
Totally. Yes. I was thinking of Parks and Rec the whole time. I mean, it was just so absurd. And it just kept getting funnier as this guy comes over with the really camera. Funny. So there are photos out there somewhere of Justin
of Justin shilling for the anti-library people. What you guys should do is start a new group called Best Friends of the Library, so that you show your like tiered support, and then just like exclusively troll them. I love this. I'm obsessed with this.
I mean, it's been really fun to be in this Facebook group and see like the petty drama of the town. Mm-hmm. Particularly with like the people that have been here for decades and decades.
Sure. Because
they kind of have nothing else to do. Like, most of them are retired. And so it's just like a lot of bickering, especially as the political season, this month and the last couple months, there's been a lot of, it's just like, it's nice that our vote is counting here. And like we just got I volunteered for our local assembly person and got a Democratic Socialist, in office. Woo. after like a very Republican area. And so there's that, but I'm still learning. Like, I'm still learning the inner workings of everything here, because it's not even a city. We're technically like a village. We're called a village. And so it's like complicated. Like, we don't have a mayor, we don't have certain things, and so trying to figure out who's in charge and like how things function and how do I get things done, and where is there really areas to change for the better without like making anyone who's been here forever feel disenfranchised or whatever. Like, it's just kind of nuanced, and I've been enjoying that learning, because I feel like as the world at large has just been such shit, there's potential to have like an actual impact on a smaller scale. But it's just so funny, like the weird petty things in that story.
You have to write that at some point. I feel like though, like it feels like it needs to be just an episode of something. It doesn't feel like there's just I have so many more questions. I can't just have one episode with this mannequin lady.
That day was just like such an like independent film in itself of just kind of things going wrong, because I feel like I put a lot of weight on that day because it was the first day in nearly 2 months where I actually felt like doing something after Addie died. And so that was like the context of it, where I was like, we're going to go out and have a fun day. And then like, that's how it starts. But then it goes on to be like, we couldn't get into brunch anywhere because it was a Saturday during like peak foliage. And so everyone was in town. Mm-hmm. And so then I was like hangry at one point, and it was in the high 70s, even though it was the end of October. And so Justin like dressed for fall and then like started freaking out about how hot he was. And so after all this, he was like, let's just go home. I want to take everything off and go home. And then we get home and he changes and I'm like, we're going back out. And he was like, why? Why are we going back out? We just got home. There's nothing to do. And I was like, I wanted a fun day in our new town. Like, we're going out. And so then we just end up walking around town. And then like the other part of that story is that he had friends visiting from the city, not even friends, like coworkers, like kind of like sort of friends, but not really visiting from the city. And they wanted to have dinner, but they wanted to eat dinner really late because we're like not people who want to eat at 9 p.m. Like we're just like, you know, and they wanted to eat really late. And so I was like, okay, you know, we're going to have a nice day, come home, relax, and then we'll go out and eat. And they kept pushing the time back even later and later. And so we ended up getting into like a lot of little tiffs throughout the day. And then when we get to the restaurant that night, they were still like a half hour late. So we're sitting at this table of set for like 12 people and just the two of us. And like me being just like in the worst mood ever because where I have to like participate in a social gathering with people I don't know, and it's not even like a close friend of his where it feels warranted for us to be. And so it was just like such a shit show. But, you know, it was also really funny. Like we laughed about it. But yeah, I feel like that whole day just could have been a fucking independent film where everything goes wrong in the silliest, ridiculous way.
That's really funny. All right, well, we're going to put a pin in that. I guess before we talk about season 3, we can just briefly mention that Christina and I are attempting to do a co-writing thing. We're attempting to write a feature together. I don't know how much to tell people because we still haven't finished outlining it because I got sick and then got married and we just had a lot of delays, but we have like half an outline and I am excited about it.
Me too. And we have like an ending, at least in terms of like the broad points.
Yeah, we have our themes, we have our characters, and we have our like ending. It's just about like how do we make sure that those are all aligned and like and paced out in a way that makes it clear what we're saying.
Yeah. It's a dark comedy, also kind of a murder mystery.
Yeah, it's a dark comedy buddy mystery.
Yeah.
Yes.
With like a lot of meta commentary about the film industry and specifically screenwriting, like culture.
We've basically taken our frustrations with the like, you know, trying to break in aspect of hustle culture and combined it with a murder mystery.
Yes.
And it's every time we come up with an idea, it's so bonkers off the wall. And I'm so excited to see it on the page.
Me too. And it's inspired by like a real kind of obsession of mine, where someone tweeted something and then I ended up doing a deep dive into their personal life because something didn't add up. And then I brought Bri into it and she was like, this should be a film. And then I was like, all right, let's write it, basically.
You know what I think is like a good takeaway from this year is that like when we freed ourselves from the obsessive must be constantly creating, we let ourselves live and do things that have then gone on to inspire us to write things that we're more excited about than ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like if you hadn't moved and like taken the time to like be by yourself and you know, ingratiate yourself into your new town for no reason other than this is your life. If I hadn't let let myself read and like separate myself from the brand and the industry, then I wouldn't have found this other like creative outlet. Like I feel like so much of our years have been like the thing that we were supposed to do the whole time, which is you can't write something new and interesting if all you're doing is writing. Sometimes you got to also live.
Yeah.
So that's been nice. That's been a nice change of pace. And I'm excited to see where it takes us in the future.
Me too.
Okay, so season 3 is happening. We are definitely doing one more season of this podcast, but it's going to look a little different. So we're going to take a slightly longer hiatus this year. This episode is coming out in early December, I believe. This is, December 1st. So hello on December 1st, everybody. We are probably not going to have a season 3 starting until late January. So we're going to take about 2-ish months off. If you're our Patreon subscriber, we will have 2 bonus episodes coming out over the course of the next month. So there are technically 2 more episodes coming out, but they will be exclusive to Patreon like we did last year. So once again, it's only $3. Come by, hang out. We're doing another screenwriting Twitter history. So I will take you through all the screenwriting Twitter drama from 2022, which there was surprisingly not that much of. We had like a packed first half of the year, and then just I think probably election season and Elon buying Twitter and all that kind of stuff sort of derailed it. So like screenwriting Twitter didn't have enough to generate for itself. Also, there's like a recession on the horizon and like a writer's strike impending. So there were other things going on, but I did still keep track of every screenwriting Twitter drama that happened up until the pause. So we will be doing a deep dive on that. We will be doing a deep dive on what we watched this year, new and old. And then we are also going to be pitching some segments for season 3. We wanted to kind of mix up our like structure for episodes. And apparently segments are a thing for other podcasts. Segments seem popular. So we've come up with a couple of ideas for what segments we want to try and incorporate next season. And if you want to have some ownership over that and vote on your favorite segment ideas, make sure that you're subscribed to our Patreon for the rest of December, because we will be posting an update and an episode, and you will get a voice.
That's right.
We are also doing only 1 episode a year next, and 1 episode a year. Season 3 will be 1 episode. It will be the ultimate episode. No, and it'll be only segments. No, we're going to be doing 1 episode a month next year with the flexibility of adding a kind of special episode. Like we've got some former guests who are doing some cool things that maybe we'll bring back to do like updates with. But this year was great. I loved season 2. Some of my favorite episodes of this podcast ever were this year. Some of the conversations we had were like mind-blowing in how cool they were and what awesome guests we had. But scheduling guests is tricky and complicated. And despite our attempt to hashtag break even, we did not. So we are still actively losing money on this podcast, which is not a sustainable practice. So we're reevaluating and trying to cut costs for next year. Hopefully we build up enough of an audience and support that we can, do it a little bit more. But at the end of the day, like it's a big undertaking. We've already talked about so much great stuff that is going to be evergreen, which I'm proud of. This is a podcast that is eminently re-listenable. But, in order to justify continuing, certainly at the clip that we set this year, we some things need to change. So we will be working on that.
Yeah, and I also think, we love having guests on and love like listening to them talk about their journeys and sharing information for our listeners. I generally don't love interviewing, but I love listening to people talk. But I feel like so many podcasts already do that. Like most film podcasts are interviewing other creators. And we had people on that we felt could like offer insight into an under talked about topic, or a topic that's like misunderstood or just not easily accessible. But I feel like we've done all of that, and we've highlighted the people and the not all of the people, but many of the people that we would want to hear from, and we've highlighted most of the topics that we felt like we couldn't cover ourselves. And so it was like, well, we want to make sure that our podcast is doing something different that isn't just like every other interview-based podcast out there. And really what's different is us talking about craft, us talking about our own experiences as things are moving along for us. And so, I just felt like a good shift to make, because we don't want to be, redundant. We don't want to be like, of course, Bri and I can talk and talk and talk to each other
right.
forever, and we do. But we want to make sure that we're like, in terms of resources, we're being smart. And and we found that people do like listening to us. They tune in regardless of a guest. And so that's why we definitely want to continue with a season 3, but it doesn't make sense to go quite at the pace that we were, because as Bri said, we've covered so much already that there isn't that much new to say.
Yeah, especially with like, both of us are making progress in a lot of different aspects of our creative works and careers, but like, it's a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so certainly we would not have enough material to do currently 2 episodes a month with that in mind. Especially because it's, very much just like a passion project of ours, right? Like this is, we're not getting paid to do this, obviously. We'd like to eventually. And, depending on how things shake out, but we are definitely also looking to expand more into the real world, developing some of our old episodes into like workshops. We did one event/workshop at Cinema Femme. That's what it was, right? Yeah, we did an event with Cinema Femme about imposter syndrome, which was really, really, really fun. And we would love to be doing more of that. So that's something that we're also going to try to focus on next year, is like getting into like events, having like bigger conversations, dialing in on like the workshop-y aspects that kind of were the originators of this podcast, and actually meeting some people in real life and inspiring people kind of in a more interactive way.
Yeah, because that was the thing that really sparked this podcast, was people enjoyed tuning in to me and Bri teach things together. And we noticed that there was real attendance for that, and regular attendance, and it made sense to turn into a podcast. And so really we would like to find ways to get to be on the same coast together.
Yes, definitely.
And be teaching things together in person for people. Yeah.
So if you are a film festival organizer, a film festival organizer, or you're a member of like a film organization, or you're attending a film school, please contact us, breakingoutofbreakingin@gmail.com. We would love to come speak to your class. Virtually if that's necessary, but like we'd also love to start like being in person again and talking to people and getting people excited about making great work that gets seen without playing the Hollywood game. So that's kind of on the horizon, is like a slower but still consistent season 3, more deep dives and craft conversations, and hopefully updates about cool things going on in our careers and what we can tell you about how we got to those points and how we're navigating them. And also hopefully more interactive opportunities to actually like go deep dive into topics we've talked about before, but making them more personal to you guys and more personal to people who desperately want to learn the information that we have to teach.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess in summation, thank you so much, everybody. If you want to hear about what our specific goals are for next year, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, patreon.com/breakingoutpod. We will also be posting 2 episodes of a podcast that month. So like if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to wait for 2 months to hear Bri and Christina talk again. No, you don't. You absolutely do not have to wait 2 months for that. In fact, we will be releasing 2 more episodes this month. So subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/breakingoutpod, to get access to that and all of the cool stuff that we have created in the 2.5 years or so that we've had this podcast.
Yep.
And thank you so much for listening. We love you all very much. And
thank you.
Have a very happy New Year, everybody.
Yes. Have a happy New Year. Thanks so much to Kelsey Rauber for our theme music, Kaylee Brown for our podcast art, Ezra Lee for editing this episode, and to all of you for listening. Links to learn more about them are in our episode description.
And thank you to our booby VIPs, who are our $10 supporters on Patreon. That's Kim Garland, Amanda Blunt, Anthony Epp, Kelsey Rauber, Norman Steinberg, and Brandy Nicole Payne. If you want your name on that list or you want to have access to all of our bonus resources related to each and every podcast episode we post for free, you can subscribe for as little as $3 to our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingoutpod.
Or join our free newsletter where we share a new creative prompt each month.